My microphone is on and your microphone is on. Say hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Oh, Glamage is it? I saw your hemlock, dude. Very, very nice. Really rather enjoyed that. A gooey evening, everybody.
Yes, I know. I'm doing my best here.
We've got a special guest.
We're very excited. Ladies, gentlemen, dogs, and people of all ages, we're very excited that April, our stunning concept artist and fantastic contributor to the project, has managed to join us.
And owner of this particular specimen.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
All the way from magical Vancouver land.
Is it magical in Vancouver?
I mean, it's Canada. Canada's a very magical country in general.
Yeah, that's true.
I imagine Canada being very similar to Narnia in my head, and I don't want anyone to spoil that.
I feel like the UK would be more like Narnia, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not now. Everything's dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more like Mordor at the moment, to be fair.
Yeah.
The other thing I found with Canada was, especially Vancouver, was because it rains so much. It's really clean. Like it literally gets a power wash pretty much every day or so, doesn't it?
It is. It's a very beautiful city. Montreal is super gorgeous too, but the winters are incredibly cold on the east side of Canada. So I'm gonna stick to the west. Because if everyone can tell by my accent, I'm not Canadian. I'm Australian.
And not predisposed to being cold as a result.
I'm really not. I'm from the tippy top northern part of Australia where it's like rainforests and beaches and dolphins and stuff.
So long time ago, I lived in Australia for probably about the first 5 or 6 years of my life. Then we came back to the UK before going back out to Oz again for another sort of 4 or 5 years. But in that time we came back to the UK, I was like, I think I was about 6 at the time. And we were at school and it started snowing. And I kid you not, I had never seen snow. And by all accounts, the teachers could not stop me from just running out of the classroom and running around in this stuff that was falling out of the sky. Because I'd never seen it before.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's going to be me when it eventually...
Yeah.
Because I still haven't really been in snow before, so it'll be very exciting when I eventually do see snow.
That's amazing.
It's pretty much an inevitability in Canada. Unless you're in like British Columbia, which is, you know, kind of almost
I am in British Columbia. That's where Vancouver is.
Oh yeah, you can get up on the ridge though, can't you? There's skiing and snowboarding up there and all sorts.
From where I live, if I like look out my window, I can see mountains with snow on them. So
Sweet.
it's there. It's just a little bit far away. Not even that far away. It's like a day trip, but.
What part of Vancouver are you in?
I live right in the city, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Very nice. Do you get to see lots of random Marvel TV shows being filmed every day as you walk to work? Have you had that experience?
It happens a lot. They were filming Deadpool 2 here last year.
Yeah.
And it's kind of annoying because it's good because you get to see Ryan going around the city on a scooter, but
awesome.
They close off a lot of the roads and stuff, so getting anywhere becomes a real hassle when there's like 500 film crew people running around.
Right.
It's a good problem to have, I suppose.
Well,
it's not.
Ryan Reynolds is a plus side to just about anything, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a bad thing, but yeah.
I mean, I'd be happy with Ryan Reynolds just hanging around.
Yeah, he sort of just goes to local restaurants and stuff. You can see Ryan Reynolds. It's super good.
Right. So just case in hand, I am doing the usual kind of boring base coaty bit. Pretty much the same as what we did for Nightingale. So I'm using Reaper Master Series paints as always. I'm using the blonde shadow as my base colour. What I'll probably do, because Nightingale came out quite a honey sort of colour, but I really want to accentuate the yellow in the fur, is I'll probably look to glaze this with a little bit of yellow at some point in time, just to give it that little bit of a yellow tint. But you don't want to go too crazy with it because it will stop. It won't look natural. So,
Magical Toast Muffin would like to know more about the wet palette that you're using.
Oh, okay, so this is a Masterson's one. I got this off of Amazon over here in the UK. I think it's a international brand. I know people in Australia who use the same one. So if the Aussies get it, then I'm pretty sure the Americans will get it as well. So just have a little look on Amazon for the Masters, and I just got a large enough one to kind of do for me, as it were. There's one on Kickstarter recently that I really like the look of that I was quite tempted to kind of pick up, but didn't get around to doing it. But I think has Glamish got? Have you got one, Glamish? Yeah, I do need the blonde paint on subscription. I go through so much of it.
Our resident American, as ever in the in my private chat, has confirmed it is available in the States. It's the one that he uses as well.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Charles. Can I just remind the chat that we're very fortunate to have April here. So if you've got any questions about the process that she and I have gone through creating the characters, the art process, the sculpt process, how we communicate with each other and develop that side of things, we'd be very happy to walk through that, use some examples from the characters that we've created.
Yeah.
That would be a pretty cool thing to talk about.
If anyone has any like concept art questions or illustration questions, I do work professionally full-time as concept artist, so I can answer any of those questions as well.
I've got a question. What is your preferred process, April, when you come to doing things? Do you like to noodle it all completely, or do you do pencil sketches first and then get it right and then you go to colour, or is it a bit of a iterative process?
Oh, I see someone in chat just asked the exact same question.
Oh, there you
that's
go.
a good one. I guess it depends on what I'm doing, but generally, first thing I do is I usually go on Pinterest or something like that, and I collect reference images of what the general look I want to go for. So with Cornelius, before I started drawing anything, I was like, because he's a D&D character, so I always write down like the goals of what I want the character to hit. So for Cornelius, I wrote down, dog, golden retriever. He's a wizard. He's a divination wizard. And then, so I started to gather reference based on those things. So I got wizard hats and, books, and I looked at some retrievers and things like that. And then I usually go into I don't generally sketch with line. I sketch with shape.
Right.
So I'll get like a big brush in Photoshop and just like lay down some shapes. And then when I find a silhouette that I think is pleasing, I'll like go over that with some line, and then I'll iterate on that. And then eventually I'll choose a design I like, and then iterate with the colors. And then and then eventually I arrive at something that you could call a character, which is Cornelius.
You make it sound so easy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that process. I love the way, I love the idea of the goals and the little details, like knowing he's a divination mage and all of the visual elements you can lead into that. Because obviously, for me, then interpreting art into sculpts, and obviously I've worked with other artists on other projects for different companies, but having April work on the character designs for us on this project has been amazing, because she can sort of find ways to tell that character's story in a plausible way inside the design, which gives me loads of hooks. So if you look at the model as Matt's painting it here, you can see the things like the bones that are used as spell components, and the potions, and the timepiece, which ties into the character's background. I love having those little things that we can noodle into the sculpt. It adds so much texture, and I don't just mean physical texture, it adds sort of narrative texture to the sculpt. So that's been a really strong feed in. I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed as a sculptor, is having such clearly focused concepts to work from. We have another question. Somebody would like to know, do we sculpt by hand or do we sculpt digitally? We sculpt digitally. So we use a program called ZBrush to produce our designs. And how long does it take from planning to making a figure? Again, because the concept art has been nice and clear, this has actually been a very smooth process. I mean, April, we've worked on these characters together. I feel that we've rarely had to sort of revise or make many changes. We've always been able to find the sort of essence of the character quite quickly within the process.
I agree. I think, like, for the first few concepts, like, I think other than Cornelius, who was my personal character, Monty was the first dog that I concepted for the actual series.
Yes.
And, like, compared to some of the later concepts, he's much more detailed because I think we hadn't worked out, like, how each other work yet.
Yes.
But I think after 3 or 4 dogs, we kind of understood what each other meant with our shape language. Like, I started to notice the way you did bags, so that's how I started to draw bags, because I think that's how you'd sculpt them. Like, obviously for minis you need to exaggerate detail, so that came into it a lot. So yeah.
Yes, the shape's got very strong, which is really helpful. And I think it's like anything, it's a feedback loop, because April can supply me with a sketch that can be quite tight or it can be quite loose, and I can develop shapes from that in 3 dimensions, and then that will then feed back into final artwork, and the interpretation that I've made will then feed that. So it's a process that it's not linear. It's more of a dialogue. It's more of a conversation, is how I like to describe it.
Yeah, that would be pretty accurate, I would say. Because in any studio or anything, like when concept artists get to work super closely with 3D artists, it always ends up being, I think, the sculpts are better and the concept art gets faster and better because you kind of learn how each other work, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Glamage says, have you worked on miniature characters before, April, or do you mainly work in the computer game industry?
This is the first time I've had anything to do with actually making miniatures. Right now, I'm a concept artist at a studio in Vancouver called Skybound. So Robert Kirkman, who did The Walking Dead and Invincible, owns the studio. So I spend my days doing things for him and, his IPs. And we're working with a company in Korea right now, producing some media for a short that I can't talk about. And I'm also working on another project I can't talk about. So
that's the perennial curse of the concept artist, and we get similar things. If you work on third party, if you work on anything to do with third party licenses, people ask you, so what have you done at work today? And you're like, stuff.
Yeah, I drew some things.
I'm just enjoying listening to you guys chat, and I'm getting some because I'm not distracting myself. I'm actually getting some pretty good headway on this.
Laying down some really solid colour there. Will you guys make more campaigns or stories we can play later on? Will you add any goblin-like chihuahuas?
I mean, chihuahuas are
no,
goblin-like.
Someone, I think April, was it you who had the idea, or was it someone else about the bad guys can be stuffed toy versions of big Gribblies. So imagine it's a
no, that wasn't me. That sounds awesome.
That was a comment on the page from one of our supporters who was really keen on the idea of like stuffed toy beholders and stuffed toy Umberhulks, and I think that it's an absolutely delightful idea.
I'm all in for that.
If we were going
that would be such a cute campaign for kids, especially. I think.
Oh yeah, it'd be. I mean,
stuffed beholders.
I think one of the things that we've done, and it wasn't a huge design goal. It wasn't like we sat down to plan this, but I think that we have created something that is amazingly appropriate for people who have got children or younger cousins or nieces or nephews they want to introduce to role playing. This is a very non-aggressive, non-confrontational way in, and I think that would feed into that really, really well. So it's something I'd like to maybe develop further in future versions of the project.
Absolutely. Like, I would love to do like a puppies version for like young kids, maybe like 5 to 7 year olds or something, just so their parents can introduce them to the concept of role playing games without, stabbing and violence.
Absolutely. Somebody wants food bowl mimics. That's Glamage. You're a cruel man. That's a mean thing to do.
I've been thinking about stuff like that, like mimic collars, which would probably be a bit nasty, but
ooh, that would be vicious.
On the inside.
How often did you get to play D&D, April?
Now, never. I haven't found another group here in Vancouver, so
Oh, why?
unfortunately, why? Oh, I don't have time. Like
Fair enough.
work and then when I get home from work, I do the other work that I do. And but there's a really cool pub here in. I think I was telling Russ about it. It's a really cool pub here in Vancouver called Stormcrow, and it's like it's nerdy. It's like a fantasy tavern inside. There's like dragon heads on the walls and
Oh, amazing.
there's like a big hearth, and there's a Krogan head on the wall from Mass Effect. There's like big horde banners. It's super good, and they have this thing called I don't remember what it's called, but a professional DM comes in and he DMs a one shot for like 6 people.
Oh, cool.
Yes, yeah, you can just go there and like play, meet some strangers, play D&D together, throw away characters and stuff like that. Super fun. So I try to do that when I can, but yeah. The director of the short that I'm working on for work right now, his name is Paul. He used to direct the Magic the Gathering shorts, like the cool animated ones where they animate the cards. Yeah. So he's super good, and he's got a crew that he plays with. So if I need to talk about D&D or Magic, I could just talk to him. So.
Oh, fantastic!
You haven't got an invite into his group yet?
No, they're like 7 or 8 people already. It's pretty intense. Yeah, because it's all the guys who used to work on the shorts as well, and they would do stuff for D&D. So they would like kind of play Dungeons and Dragons as like reference gathering.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Well, we're planning a short at Gen Con, and so that's going to be great. That's going to be Matt's running it, and there's a bunch of us playing, and looking forward. Obviously, we're going to have more opportunities to all be at shows together.
Heck yes.
That's definitely something that we're going to be able to do is play more D&D. Everyone should play more D&D. That's my PSA for the day.
I think that's why the dogs are so good, because so many people, I think in the comments and stuff on Facebook have been like, oh, I haven't, gotten into D&D, but now I want to because of the dogs.
Yeah.
So absolutely, next time we all meet up, we'll have to play Doggy D&D together.
Oh, for sure. Now, Matt, you think you're going to be at PAX Unplugged when April is, so hopefully that might be our first kind of P&P face-to-face moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, if I can make it out, we'll have to go and get some dinner and a few beers and talk nerdy stuff.
Absolutely. Where's that one at? Is that in Philadelphia? PAX Unplugged?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because Gen Con's Indianapolis.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be at... Well, go on.
I was going to say, we've got to get you to Gen Con next year just because it's such an experience.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so sad. Like, it was like I could go, but then I couldn't go, and I could go, and I couldn't go, and then I could go, but there's no hotels.
That's the thing. I mean,
yeah, you got to get in.
Yeah, we always say about Gen Con, it's like the Matrix. No one can tell you what it is. You have to see it for yourself. It's it's
killing me. Like every time I look or I get like some info about Gen Con, it's like another one of this thing that I love is going.
Oh.
So yeah, it's very painful. But I'm going to be at PAX at the end of the month. PAX West, and I'll be in my Kenku cosplay. So
that's awesome. Your cosplay work that you've done so far that I've seen looks amazing.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually doing his eyes as we speak.
That's really, really exciting. And it was a private chuckle for me, and I realised that it's not in any way a reference, but it was a private chuckle for me that he's called Russell.
Oh, right. I thought about that. It's like Russell with a T, but obviously the T is quite silent.
That was kind of cute. But I hear, Sean's in the chat.
Dooley.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, hi, Sean. Thank you so much for your help. Take your spot. I won't take your spot at Gen Con.
Gen Con's one of those. It's like depends on how friendly you want to be.
I wasn't keen on the idea of like rooming with 12 strangers,
bunking in with strangers.
Dressed up as a giant crow. Yeah.
No, it's definitely one that we need to plan ahead on. I mean. It's one of those shows that I think that if you have the opportunity, everyone should get over there at least once and see it, because it is just There is nothing like it. I suppose the nearest thing would be something like Spiel Matte, but it's not really the same kind of thing.
No, because I think Gen Con's much more about. I think the thing you have to accept with Gen Con is you're not going to see everything.
No, that's
And I think that's part of its charm. You could spend the entire weekend just in the gaming hall playing games. You could spend the entire weekend just in a hotel lobby playing games. You could spend your entire weekend in the vendor hall just buying games.
Oh man,
you can, you can just spend so long just doing everything. Right, I think I'm base coloured, so I'm gonna leave his hat for now. Do I want to leave his hat? No, I'm gonna do his hat.
I'm very excited that Critical Role have announced they're going to be at MCM, which is the London Comic Con in October.
Yeah, I saw. That's crazy. They're really getting quite global.
They are. It's amazing and well deserved. Charles is commenting about PAX Prime that he may know some people in Seattle.
Oh well, you'll know me. So if you see a giant crow walking around with a wizard hat on, that's me.
Yeah. But yes, London MCM Comic Con is super exciting because obviously, speaking personally, that's considerably easier to get to than Indianapolis or Seattle or anywhere that isn't in the UK. So I've already got my tickets. Matt, you're going to be there, I think you said.
I think I'm going to
looking into it.
I'm absolutely going to try because it's on at the same weekend as Spiel, so I just need to see what commitments I have over in Germany first.
That would be some globetrotting if you had to do both of those in one weekend.
That's what I'm going to try and do.
Well, I admire your spirit.
Well, start with a can-do attitude and then work out if I can not do it. I want to ask some questions about cosplay, and I want to ask them in a way that isn't rude, but I'm deeply fascinated about what motivates people to cosplay. What do you get out of it? Like, do you?
I can't. Like, I can't speak. Obviously, I can't speak for every cosplayer. I'm sort of new to the hobby, just because where I lived in Australia, there wasn't really. I'm from the bush. I'm from the middle of nowhere in Australia, so
nice.
Wasn't a lot of opportunities to do anything. But
could have got dressed up and just gone out for a drive in your ute. What's wrong with you?
It's a bit hot to wear big bird costumes where I'm from.
Oh, fair enough.
I also run the risk of like pissing off the local giant bird populations, which I'd rather not do. But I can't speak for every cosplayer, but I like quite monstrous cosplays or like creature cosplays or cosplays that like completely covers your entire body.
Right.
So like you're completely embodying this character that you've made, or a character from a show or a movie or whatever. And yeah, it's just fun just to be someone else for a day.
Is it do you like, is it the performative aspect or the
I think absolutely. Like for me, it's definitely the performance. Like I'm so excited to get into the character of my Kenku. I get to stalk around with my T-Rex hands and a big hat and snapping my beak at people. It's going to be heaps of fun.
That is pretty cool. I mean, I did my first foray into cosplay last year, where Kate, my wife, and she made herself a Professor Sprout costume, and I made a Mad Eye Moody, and we went to a weekend, and I enjoyed myself way more than I expected. It was really, really good fun. But for me, it was the crafting. I enjoyed
absolutely.
the process. That's what I was really interested in.
There's nothing like some hot glue burns.
You going in with the wash now, Matt?
Going in with the wash. I'm just going to wash the fur initially, and then I'm going to go in back in over everything else with the brown. So
you're still using a very warm shading wash with the sepia. Is it your plan then to use the glaze to sort of cool the fur back away to the yellow again?
More to tint it, because yellow's still a fairly warm colour. I'm going to rely on the blue and the purple in the hat to give me my cool tones in terms of composition. So I actually think the yellow will make it feel a little bit richer, if anything else.
Cool.
Is the idea, but I'm basically just going completely over everything with the sepia wash, knowing that I am going to come back in over the top of leather and the books and all the other little doodads hanging down with a more localized brown wash just to darken them down a little bit more.
And again, this is a methodology that's very user friendly if people aren't particularly experienced in painting. Is this sort of neat, painting the lines neatly to put on your base colors, and then an ink wash over the whole thing will bring everything to life. And if you're new to painting and you're not feeling confident, this is probably as far as you'd need to go to have a model that would look really good on the table.
Absolutely. I mean, once this, it always amazes me, this stuff that as you're putting it on, you're like, yeah, it's running into the gaps and all that kind of jazz. But then once it dries and it's done its work, the models I just think look fantastic. That's why I always get puzzled when I see models that don't look great on the table, and I'm not being rude about it. They just don't look great. And the saddest thing about it is knowing that the person who painted them probably took way longer to kind of make them not look good, if you know what I mean, than they probably ought to have done.
It's the work smart, not work hard thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody says, will this be watchable later? Absolutely. It'll be available on our Twitch channel, and tomorrow's pup date that we put out will contain a direct link to be able to watch the video on demand. And again, if you have any questions that you want us to address in the video now, let us know. But equally, if the video sparks any questions, feel free to drop those into the Kickstarter page comments, and we will do our very level best to answer them either within Kickstarter, Twitter, or whichever platform is most appropriate.
I do chuck them up on my YouTube channel for posterity for the time being, while we work out what we're going to do with P&P's painting channel.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Any tips to avoid a glossy finish from the washes? My experience of the GW ones is that they dry very matte, actually. I don't know if you find that, Matt.
If you let them pull, then they will go glossy. So
really?
Try and be very careful about when you use them neat, basically, because the more neat they are, the more likely they are to end up drying quite thick and therefore quite glossy as a result of it.
Cool. Welcome to Bianca TX, joining us in the chat. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Bianca's, I think I can't remember if you were in the stream or not, but Bianca was struggling with a Reaper Bones mini. So we had a little chat on Twitter about it, and I think we've made a little bit of headway with it. She was a little
fantastic.
She was a little bit worried that her painting wasn't that great, and when we actually looked at the mini and how the mini was not really helping to be painted because of the like the level of detail that was available in that mini, then we kind of got past that a little bit. I think that's the same Bianca.
It is indeed. She's confirmed in the chat that was indeed her. And whilst we're talking, welcome Speaking Beast, and thank you very much for your subscription.
Yeah.
Good old Twitch Prime.
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime, even, yes.
April Prime.
April Prime. Boom.
The best film of Prime.
Thank you.
Even better than Optimus.
Does that mean we can get you delivered on a 1-day notice, April?
You can. I can come with 2-day free shipping.
Nice.
Anywhere around the world.
So where Steamforge HQ is in Manchester, they are right next to a Amazon distribution center. So they actually do hour-long hour Prime.
Oh, the dream.
Right. So you run out of like biscuits and a box of tea, you can actually just Amazon Prime it, and some bloke comes around on a moped with it.
I would be
amazing.
So broke if I had the ability to just push a button on my phone and then have someone bring me whatever I'd ordered. That would be terrible.
Right.
The one in Vancouver isn't super far from where I work either, so it's usually a day, even without Amazon Prime. Which is great.
Bianca's posted a link to a tiger that she's painted on Twitter, and I'm liking it. I wouldn't be down on myself if I'd painted that at all. I think it's extremely usable as a playing piece.
I'm going to check this out. Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
I like the
very cool
multi-tone stripes. I think that's really clever.
But you absolutely shouldn't retire now. I take it as
Yes.
completely tongue in cheek, but no, that's fantastic. 3 months of painting minis, and you've got to that. That's brilliant.
Yes, that definitely worth developing further. Someone's asked if you have to go through a different process of prepping PVC miniatures, as the Doggies will be, as opposed to working in hard styrene, GW style plastic or metal.
It's a good question. Let's just put Cornelius off to one side, and let me grab a mini just for a second. So this is out of Dark Souls. I think this is out of the Invader box.
Yeah,
so
that's an unreleased model.
This is an unreleased model. So yeah, forget you saw it. Don't tell anyone, especially not Charles, who absolutely isn't watching right now, going nuts at me. I'm just picking random
Charles
minis.
Is going nuts right now.
See, so all I do is I grab a scalpel with a sharpish blade on it, and what I'm looking to do is just clean the mold lines off. Now, models will almost certainly always be molded somewhere along the sides of the models. It's very rare that you're actually going to get a mold down the front. Russ can tell you at great length as to why that is.
I won't though, because it's very boring.
So if you want to just clean up a PVC model, you just literally get the tip, and all I'm doing is just basically scraping it along where the mold line is.
At about a 45-degree angle to the surface, isn't it?
Yeah, so as I'm coming in there... Well, actually, I'm closer to 90, to be honest with you. No, I'm not. That's a lie. Yeah, it's about 45 degrees. Does Charles want me to use a different model?
No, not at all. Charles is just... so everyone knows Charles is our sanity check and resident American. Charles is just reminding us that with these PVC miniatures, the mold release that they use on them gives them a slightly oily finish, and so it is advisable, just as people would with a resin miniature, to wash them in warm soapy water before you attempt to undercoat them. If you don't do that, then you'll struggle to get your primer to stay on the model.
I mean, to be fair, you should do that with every mini, not just resin or plastic. You should do it in metal as well. It's just good practice.
Metal uses a silicon-based mold release agent. Having visited our Holland-based casting company, they use a talcum-based release agent, which means that our figures are a little bit more primer-friendly, but it's still a very, very good habit to be in to wash your models.
Cool. So just while Cornelius is drying, let's grab this guy. So this guy looks kind of softish for the time being. I'm just going to flick my airbrush compressor on, so you might hear a little bit of a thrum in the background, and I'll show you quickly how I would base colouring. So I'm going to get a manky old bit of cardboard down. I'm going to grab my airbrush, and I'm going to be using Steinler-Res Easy Application Surface Primer, which I think is the best to put through your airbrush if you're going to airbrush. Now, what we can do, of course, is we can use a rattle can, but because I'm indoors, I'm not going to do that for obvious reasons.
My advice would always be, if you can airbrush, if you can aerosol, I would avoid hand priming miniatures. It's not a good idea.
Yeah. Right. So all I'm doing now is basically I've got a bit of air in my tin now, so. Basically, I'm just going to spray it black with my airbrush, and I'm going to be quite quick on this.
Now, if I wanted to do this myself, Matt, because I've got an airbrush, but I don't use it for priming, where would I get that primer from? Because I've never seen it before.
Amazon. It's from Badger Airbrush Company.
Oh, that's nice and easy then.
Yeah, so you can get it direct from Badger, or you can get it from Amazon. Do be wary that there was a batch that got really badly affected by cold when it got shipped over. I think they're out of stock of that now. They've recalled it all and they will replace it. So if you do buy a bottle and it doesn't work properly, then just send it to Badger and they will sort you all out. So all I'm doing... Go on.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, one of the things that won't really come across on the camera, but is super relevant to the Doggies, is... just like with the hard styrene plastics that models like Games Workshop are made from, the material that we use has a ever so slight translucency to it. It's not completely opaque, and so it means that fine detail can look soft and the heating the primer, one of the things it does is it will make the miniature look crisper because it stops the light from penetrating and diffusing. So those wax-like soft edges suddenly become sharper again.
Yeah.
So if you are going to paint your dogs, you will find that once you've primed them, an extra element of crisper detail sort of mysterious.
Okay, so this is a good case in point. You can see now that an awful lot of detail, especially the detail on the shield, is really starting to like pop out. And it's at this point that you start forgetting that it's a PVC mini, exactly for the reason that Russ has said. Like, it's got a huge amount of detail on it. It's just when you're playing a board game with an unpainted mini, you're not seeing all the detail that the sculptor has actually put into it. So we're gonna let that guy dry off. I'm just gonna clean my airbrush out. So the way
I assume it doesn't take long to dry because it's a very thin coat that you're putting on, isn't it?
Yeah. So I grab a pipette and I grab a squirt of clean water. I stick it in my airbrush and then I suck it all out, and then that basically then gets squirted into my waste cup. So I have a clean cup and I have a waste cup. Little squirt of airbrush cleaner. And I just blow that through until that comes through. So
the anchor says if you're a complete airbrush noob, you don't even know where to buy one. Where would you start? How would you start?
I would be prepared to spend a little bit of money. I don't think you would enjoy airbrushing if you try to cut any corners with it. So I think you need a decent brush. I think you need a decent compressor, and you will massively help yourself out if you buy an air tank as well. So the air tank basically gets filled up by the compressor, and it gives you a clean source of air rather than a compressor which just goes pop, 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 pop with the air all the time. But so this is my favourite. This is an Iwata HPC Plus. I have also used like a Harder and Steinbach brush. This is the Ultra, I think. Yeah, so this is the Ultra. I wasn't as keen on that. They're both similar price brushes, so ideally if you're a complete airbrush noob, find someone who you hang out with and talk painting with, and chat about airbrushes with them, and maybe see if you can borrow, have a go of them, or whatever. So, brilliant places to go to that are shows. If you can get out to Adepticon and hang out with a painting gang who live under the stairs at Adepticon, very, very welcoming bunch of guys. You get a huge amount of pro painters go there, always willing to kind of give lots of advice. So yeah, try and get along to a show or something. Right, so we're going to be trying to simulate the light coming down from above. So I've basically got white in my gun, and I'm now going to basically spray from above, and I'm going to spray from a little bit of a distance away. So I've got quite a diffuse amount of light going on, and all I'm trying to do is just catch the upper surfaces. And again, I'm trying to just build it up really slowly. You could do this with a rattle can. You could just have slightly less control over it. But with a rattle can, you can get the same effects. But yeah, all I'm doing is just spraying it from above. And basically this will show me where all my light surfaces need to be and where all my dark surfaces need to be. Okay? So I'm just building it up, and I want to bring this to almost white if I can, because that will give me the greatest amount of contrast. And if we remember from other kind of painting streams, contrast is basically what we're trying to achieve with painting. And now I can go in, because I've got an airbrush, and get like a little bit of a spot just on his face, just a little bit of bounce light coming up, and that gives me a little bit of kind of focus on his face. I'm just going to hit this side of the shield. Right.
Can I just ask, Matt, are you just using white? Is that a primer, or is that just ordinary white airbrush paint?
No, that's Styler Res White.
That's another primer. Cool. Yeah. So this is really interesting because I'm not a big airbrush user, and I think of it as an advanced technique. But actually, if I was starting out as a new painter, that's showing me where all the light and shading is. I'd actually find that really, really useful.
Well, let's kind of. I feel slightly embarrassed because April was a professional artist and I am a complete amateur. But let's have a little look and play with basically what we've got here, because it shows. I can show a bunch of principles. What I want to do is I want to just quickly get a little bit cleaner in my airbrush so it doesn't get all gummed up.
While you're doing that, April, do you ever work in physical media, or is your work entirely done digitally? Is she still there?
Nah,
We
she's.
lost her?
Oh, is that me?
Yeah, sorry. I realised I
Sorry,
opened the airbrush.
you guys went all you went all crunchy there for a second.
I think the sound of the compressor plays with the audio a bit. I was saying, do you ever work physically, or do you only work in digital format?
I sketch traditionally, but I sort of just for the work I do, it's not super helpful.
Sure.
Or useful because I have the amount of iterations I have to do, and there's a lot of concept artists who still do a lot of their work traditionally, and that's totally fine. But I don't like touching paint, and I don't like touching charcoal or like lead dust. So working digitally is great for me.
Sure.
Right, so let's grab a white piece of paper, which is going to absolutely blow the camera out, right? But I want to show you something. So if I take basically a light surface and a dark surface, right? This is my light and this is my shadow. If I then apply the same colour to it, i.e. I grab a pen and I paint over the top of it, you can see that it's exactly the same colour, but it's much lighter on the light and it's much darker on the dark. Fairly obvious stuff, right? But now think about this exact same principle from a miniatures point of view when you're looking at where I've really accentuated where the light volumes are and where the dark volumes are. I now basically have that already in. So all I need to do is grab some paint, and what I'll do is I'll just grab some red, which I've got on my palette. I water it down, and then basically we just paint it on.
So now you're just color tinting the values of grey that are already there. I think, and again, this is more April's area of expertise. I'm sure I've seen 2D digital artists work in this method of doing a picture almost in black and white and then colorizing it afterwards. Is that a thing?
Yeah, so a lot of artists do that to make sure their values are okay, because you can get very muddy values if you just work straight from color if you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, you can use like overlay layers and multiply layers. It's pretty much what you're doing. It's just like the digital 2D version.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love how
the same thing. Yeah.
I love how these principles can apply to all of these different kinds of media and different applications.
Right, so we're just drying it down with an airbrush, and then you'll see precisely what why this zenithal shading is so important to my painting style.
So this is reliant on people having good kind of paint watering down.
Yeah, but what's beautiful about this now is you can see, like with the first color. So let's go back to our example, right? So because paint is translucent in the same way that this is, if I paint over the same bit, what happens to that bit? It gets darker, right?
That gets darker, yeah.
Yeah, so the more I paint over the same bit, the darker it gets. I'm just using the exact same pen, right? But now I've got a transition between a light, a medium, and a dark. Yeah? Just using the exact same paint. The exact same pen. So when we come on here, I want to make the red look really red, so I grab the red, and now I'm basically going in with a second layer over the top of it. But now what I'm trying to do is just capture those kind of upper surfaces and just build it up.
And then fade it away to those shaded areas.
Yeah, just basically smooth it into the shadow. So every time the brush comes off of camera, it's going into my mouth to get it slightly cleaned and loaded with spit, basically. As I've said before, like, you absolutely shouldn't do it, but
every painter does.
Every painter does.
Every model has somebody's DNA in there somewhere.
Basically. So that's it. And we just start building up the reds there. I'll let that dry off, and I can come back in and just really, we'll let that dry off, and we'll start getting on the finishing touches with Cornelius now. And then we'll come back to that guy when he's dried off a little bit.
That's really interesting to see from my perspective, because I'm very old school with the way I paint. So I would put a single flat layer on and do most of that shading and highlighting by hand, and that's why you can paint a miniature in an hour and it takes me 3 days.
Right, because I've done
and I probably end up with something that's inferior as a final result. So I'm having to guess where all of the light goes instead of actually letting it work naturally.
Yeah, but what you might end up with is something that is artistically more stronger, because you're actually interpreting the miniature, whereas mine's a lot more realistic as a result of it.
I guess. So, April, when you're painting in 2D and you're doing something like the portrait of Cornelius, obviously you can't use any of these techniques. How do you determine light volumes and light sources and how you're going to? Because one of the things I love about the pictures that you do is your use of shadows and the way you'll have like little holes punched through hats to create little light spots in shadows and things, which is a lovely touch. How do you sort of determine how all of that's going to fall on the composition?
Unfortunately, in 2D, you kind of just have to get good at guessing. So you have to do a lot of studies. Yeah, so I do a lot of master studies. I do a lot of, just boring, paint a sphere in the environment. Because there's main light source and then there's a bounce light source, and then the bounce light bounces off something else and changes the color. Like shadows have color, light has color. Yeah, It's just studies.
So do you do a lot of study work that is purely academic and no one will ever see it?
Yes, I think most of the time I'm doing something like that. Like I never really post any of my studies, but it's, like I said, like master studies, so looking at really famous painters and how they solve problems. And I could do 3 different studies for the same painting. Like I might look at shape in one study, and then the next study I might look at color, and then in the next study I might look at how they've painted a human face, for example. So
sure. Do you think there are any techniques that you use in your work that would be relevant to people who are painting miniatures, or do you think the disciplines are too far apart?
I think, color theory sort of just comes out with everything, really. Like when you're painting your minis, obviously I don't have a lot of experience painting minis, but sort out your colors beforehand, maybe. That always helps. If you can do a little doodle and sort out what you want to go where, it's probably save you time if you decide that you don't like something.
Yes, that's why I block out my entire mini first, because then if I'm not happy with it, then I haven't wasted any time doing any highlighting or ink washing or anything.
If I'm going to paint multiples of something, like say, I don't know what a good example would be, but something that's wearing a uniform, say, I will paint one model to completion before I go in on the others. So I suppose that's the equivalent of doing a study, is I'm doing one miniature and checking.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's the mini equivalent of thumbnailing, I suppose.
Yeah. Just catching Kami one up with where we are in the stream. What's your worst painting accident? Last week I dropped a Nuln oil pot onto myself whilst wearing a white shirt. For those in the chat that aren't aware, Nuln oil is a deep black ink wash. It'd be like dropping a pot of drawing ink onto yourself. Not ideal. What's your worst painting accident, Matt?
It always involves these kind of nipple top bottles being blocked, and me squeezing and foolishly believing that this time it's not going to explode.
Oh dear.
And it almost invariably always does. So yeah, exploding paint.
I have 2 good ones. From my old house, I once was working on assembling miniatures and didn't realise that I dropped the super glue bottle onto the floor. And when I tried to get up, I realised I'd glued my boot to the carpet.
Holy smokes! Wow.
And had to physically cut the shoe away, and we had a rubber shoe print in the carpet. We had to replace the carpet. So I was popular.
I was going to say you were very popular that day.
And in this new house that we're in, which had only recently been painted when this happened, I'd shaken a pot and used a pot of elf flesh, which is a very, very strongly coloured sort of elastoplast beige peach colour. I was squeezing it closed because I didn't want to spill the paint, and the lid hinge sheared. So the pressure squeezing it shut instead launched the pot out of my hand and sprayed paint vertically up the wall for about 8 feet.
Nice.
Oh no!
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
This is why I paint digitally.
There you go.
Yes, very difficult to spill digital paint.
It's very difficult to spill digital paint.
In fact, if you manage it, you get some sort of prize.
I've painted the wrong thing before, but I have the luxury of Control Z or Control Z. Excuse me. I've been in Canada for too long.
I could not live without Control Z in ZBrush in particular, and also Quick
That's
Save
the
because
best.
ZBrush is the most flaky piece
It's
of
a
software.
crasher.
Oh, is it ever? You know, it's like me, Ben, and Tom, the three guys that are sculpting all the time in the Steamforge studio. We have crash counts, and it's like, what are you up to today? Anyone got to 12 yet? Anyone up to 15 yet? So Glamage says he went to the pub the other day with a cocktail stick super glued to his trousers. Nice.
Oh.
That's funny. How did he
Somebody
pass
said
that off?
He dropped it and couldn't find it while he was working, and then it turned up glued to his trousers. Many years ago, I had a poorly shaken undercoat spray, which made furry space marines. That's always awful. I once painted the Fellowship of the Ring from the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings miniatures range, involving some highly experimental and very successful blending techniques that I'd sort of semi-developed for painting Legolas, and I was really, really proud with the model. It was unlike anything I painted before, and I went to varnish it and sprayed it black with a can of primer instead of varnish.
My god!
It's like 2 days' work just instantly wiped out.
I've done a 45-hour competition piece, so I went to give it a light dusting with matte varnish, and it snowed on me.
That's horrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was probably one of the last models I ever painted competitively. I
no longer use spray varnish because it's Russian roulette. Aerosol varnish is bad, people. If you are proud of your paint job, avoid aerosol varnish. You can buy brush-on varnishes, which are probably better. And thank you to Amaranth for the subscription or the follow or whatever that little rainbow sheep thing is. I'm not very good at Twitch.
I think Rainbow Sheeps is a follow.
Cool. That is without a doubt the cutest miniature I've ever seen, says Amaranth. It is a very cute miniature.
I'm glad people like Cornel.
Cornel he's awesome. He really is.
I never got to play him. He's now everyone's character.
There you go.
I'll have to resurrect one of my old D&D characters back from the dead.
How weird is it going to be going to a show and actually seeing a Cornelius being cosplayed?
I hope someone dresses up like their assistant dog.
That would be amazing.
Because that's the joke, right? He's a divination wizard. He can see things.
That is genius. Yeah. We actually have an ability in the game called Assistance Dog, which is great.
That's a very good
definitely
ability.
gets it on his character sheet. Unat Pat is now following. Welcome.
Right.
Cornel won by a country mile as well, our poll for which dog should be painted this evening. He took
neat.
like 2/3 of the vote. So
that was April spam voting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made a bunch of bots and bot accounts.
Any rumor you've heard that she is in fact sponsored by the Russian government are entirely untrue.
Right.
Oh, absolutely untrue. They're great. I love the Russian government. Super good.
They're the best people. The best.
Oh, very honest.
I mean, you don't hear anyone saying anything bad about them, so.
Exactly. So it must be good.
Thank you, Biancats, for the subscription.
Yay!
Subscribed with a tier 1 sub.
Bianca from Texas.
I think the last 3 Dungeons and Dragons characters have all been wizards.
Do you like playing wizard then, do you?
I do quite like a wizard. I'm trying to work my way through each school of magic from a wizarding background.
That's going to keep you busy for a while. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going well. Cornel was my divination, but I'll skip that. That's cool. It's fine.
I've always been a divine person. I tend to play a lot of clerics and paladins.
Really?
Yeah, I really like the. I've always had a thing about utility and support characters. You know, in Overwatch, I am invariably the Lucio player. That's kind of my jam.
I remember we had that combo. I play Mercy and Lucio as well. So
yeah. I mean, I just love that. Knowing that you're out there making everybody that little bit better is kind of a cool thing. And
the balance of life and death.
Yeah, and clerics in D&D are low-key really awesome. Best tank characters in the game. We've picked up a bunch more follows there. Thank you, people.
Yay, welcome.
Best tanks in the game are clerics because you cast Spiritual Weapon, you attack with the bonus attack, and then you use your main attack to just do dodge, and everyone's at disadvantage to hit you, and you just stand there in plate armor all day long. It's amazing.
Oh, Becca's in chat. Hi, Becca.
Becca says, what does she say? What are you hoping to do after the Kickstarter campaign is done and the rewards are sent out? Any big plans for Dungeons and Doggies long term? Yes. Many plans. We are having, I'd like to call it a council of war, but that sounds really aggressive and confrontational. It's going to be more of a sort of puppy dog pile of...
So, itty-bitty puppy committee.
I want to be in a puppy dog pile.
Yeah, the Itty Bitty Puppy Committee is the best name ever. It's officially
that. Well, itty bitty kitty committee is already taken. So.
So basically, the timescale on things is, we'll finish the campaign. We'll finish the campaign. Oh, April Prime is now following.
I wasn't following.
We'll finish the campaign on Tuesday, and then we will obviously dig deep into putting everything in place in the background to delivering it, because once the campaign finishes, we always say that's kind of when the work starts, because although the miniatures are designed, we've got all of the production stuff, all of the playtesting stuff, the layout, the art, all of those things start to come together. And we're also going to be having that kind of what we want to do for the future, because, Cats and Catacombs is definitely a thing.
Yeah, it's no secret.
That's no secret. Dogs 2, we'd be crazy not to take it further. But again, talking earlier about, the idea of leaning into it being something that we can do for newer players and younger players, that's definitely something we want to explore. I mean, there are ideas coming out of us left, right, and centre right now. I think one of the things that we need to do is sit down and edit that and come up with a strategy that doesn't involve us releasing something new every 10 minutes, because we've got so many ideas. Let me just check. Charles says a puppy pile is his life goal. I think it's everyone's life goal. I got to meet 2 new puppies today, so I'm very happy.
Oh my god!
I met a black Cocker Spaniel puppy called Humphrey, who was 8 weeks old and was an absolute delight. And I got to meet a brown Cocker Spaniel puppy called Ziggy, who was 9 weeks old and equally an absolute delight.
A lot of Cocker Spaniel puppies.
Spaniels are super popular for some reason near where I live. There are like 5, 6 Spaniels on our estate that I know.
Yeah, do you have a lot of hunting around you, Russ? Or?
No, I mean, none of them are. I mean, there is. We're in quite a rural area, as you know, and there is a big gun dog kind of movement in the area, but none of the people that I personally know nearby that have spaniels have them for that reason. I think certainly in the UK, I think they are probably, if not the most popular breed, then they're probably in the top 3. You do see a lot of spaniels around. It's a hugely popular breed in the UK.
Yeah.
I don't have a dog, unfortunately, but I live in an apartment building with so many other dogs, and I get to see them in the elevators every morning. And I don't know the humans' names, but I know the dogs' names.
Yeah, it's the best way to get to know people is to have a dog, because everyone wants to talk to you.
There's a massive, fat, old Labrador. His name is Hubert. I see him in the elevator. He's incredible. He's so sweet. That's
amazing. Do you have a particular favourite dog, April, or breed of dog?
Jeez. I mean, I love poodles because they are so smart and they're so sweet. But I grew up with Jack Russells and Fox Terriers when I was a kid, so I'm quite a fan of old little Jackies.
Oh wow!
But I mean, any dog is a good dog, really.
Oh, every dog is a good dog. As a child, I had a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, so I've got a bit of a thing for Bull Terriers.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And H, who is the technician who is our brilliant 3D print operator and genius that makes all of my digital designs turn into reality. He had 2 beautiful American bulls, and then sadly no longer with us because they were very, very old. But they were just lovely, lovely dogs, and I've got a lot of time for those breeds.
Absolutely. Like, I've never met a boxer or a Staffordshire Bull Terrier or a Pit Bull or anything that haven't been just cuddle bugs.
Oh, absolutely. Boxers are amazing because they just seem to stay puppies their entire life. They never grow up.
Boxers and Dobermans, they're just big, silly boys.
Let's have a quick look at chat. Bianca says she ran a game with her niece for the first time on Friday. She's 10, same age I was when I started Dungeons and Dragons. You give me such an idea, great idea with the doggos. Excellent. The doggy answer to Hero Quest, that would be lovely. A 210-pound Russian breeder dog in our neighbourhood. That is some weight for a dog. 210 pounds is a lot of dog.
That is a big dog.
That's a big boy.
That's more of a lion than a dog.
I mean, they are really those like Tibetan Mastiffs and stuff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to cross one on a bad day.
No.
There was a chap in town the other day. In fact, just shortly after I took those photos of the pub for you, April, I met an old gentleman walking a Bernese mountain dog of advanced years. Oh, so lovely.
So fluffy.
And
it
he
was
like
the toss-up between a Bernese Mountain Dog or a Saint Bernard for Charisse, our cleric, but eventually I went with Saint Bernard because, you know, the mythology of the neck barrel was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
I think it was too perfect, wasn't it, with the healing potion in there?
Mm.
Is there
3 full swigs.
Is there any particular breed of dog you would like to see going into Wave 2, April?
I mean, Russ has seen what I'm keen on. I really want to do a Russian Borzoi because they are the most elegant, ghostly, strange dog deer gods.
Oh yes, there's a little sketch that April's done, which we'll keep under wraps for now, but it's a lovely idea.
Mm-hmm. And but there's so many dogs. Like we could do this forever and still have dogs left over.
Yes, we could. I mean, you know, not that we would ever want to sort of, you know, like over egg the pudding, but in terms of covering breeds, I think somebody worked out in chat recently that if we did every dog just in the American Breed Association handbook, and we did one per of D&D class, we'd end up making over 6,000 different dog miniatures.
I mean, I wouldn't say no, but there's a lot of dogs.
That is a lot of dogs.
My friend Dave, who Matt knows, Dave Millington, who is a very big supporter of everything that we do and a thoroughly nice guy, is a big mathematician. And when I was chatting to him early on when we were planning the project about the ins and outs of can we offer the dogs individually, should we offer them all as a set, what's the best way to do it, he did the maths on if we had 13 dogs and we let people buy any combination of 13 dogs, he worked out that it was something like if you were only allowed to buy up to one of each model, it was still over like 65,000 different combinations. And he said, and then if you let people buy up to 3 of each model, it went into the millions. And that was the point where I was really strongly committed to the idea of doing a set.
Seemed to make an awful lot of sense.
Yes, the logistics on that broke my brain, but it's great.
Like you can still, like, Cornelius is a golden retriever, but if you painted him black, like, you can get away with black Labrador or.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, honestly, I mean, one of the really fascinating things, possibly I found sculpting them, and I don't know if you found this doing the drawings, is when you lift the colour out of the equation, you realise how similar certain breeds are. It was only when I came to sculpt Tonka, our lovely Kickstarter exclusive for the Dungeons and Doggos comic, I realised how similar in the physical structure he is to a St. Bernard. Just you take off the fur, and in terms of his face build and structure, he's actually very, very similar physiologically. And I realised that there are quite a few dogs where it's the thickness of the fur and the coloration of their coat that kind of defines them as one breed and not the other, which is probably really obvious to anyone who knows dogs, but I'd never really sat down and analysed it in the same way that this project gets you to do. One of the joyous things about doing this is you really get to understand dogs in a way that you would never otherwise have an opportunity to. So that's been really good fun.
Like so many of my Australian friends have been messaging me like, can you do a cattle dog? And I'm like, there is a cattle dog. Like you can't tell if he's blue or red because he's got no colour on him. He just looks like a dog.
It's one of the but prior to this project for one of the Steamforge projects for Guild Ball, we have a miniature called Honor, and her storyline takes her from where she starts out in the cities out into the effectively the countryside of the world, and she becomes she works with a team of players who are representative of the local farming community, and she has a sheepdog as a companion. And we sculpted the sheepdog. And when I first showed the render, I actually had to use the ZBrush masking tools to put Border Collie patterning onto the model, because without that patterning, the Border Collie didn't look like a Border Collie. It was such an important part of expressing what that breed is that it was one of the very rare times where I've done anything other than show the model in one color, because it needed it that much.
That's actually Becca might know this. Becca's also a concept artist. If anyone sees her in chat, she's super good.
Oh, fantastic!
At least,
make sure. Sorry, I was just sorry to interrupt you, but Becca, make sure you put your Twitter in there if you want people to have a look at your stuff.
Oh yeah, plug your stuff back. So with the company that my studio has been working with, they're called Come to Us, and they're in Korea, and we don't really deal with the artists or anything in that studio. We deal with the higher ups. So with the concept art, like I can't send them stuff that's just like turnarounds or line work or anything that I would be very happy to give to a 3D artist. Like, even though it's just in the conceptual stage, I still have to paint full illustrations of these concepts, which is something I wouldn't normally do, because I'm showing these concepts to people who aren't artists. So they don't, it's like trying to sell imagination to people with no imagination, basically.
Yes. Matt,
thank you, Becca.
Matt would be able to talk about the concept of vertical slices and showing for anyone who doesn't know, April, I'm sure, will be aware of this concept, but the idea of the vertical slice, for anyone who doesn't know, is if you're showing an in-progress design for a game or a project to license vendors or higher ups who aren't necessarily conversant with it, you take one tiny part of it and you make it to a completely finished standard, because just as April says about the concept art, people can't see past the fact that it's not finished. So you end up making one tiny level or one tiny part of your board game to a ridiculous degree of polish, even though the rest of the game might not even really exist in a playable format yet, just to sort of convey what it is you're trying to do. And it's just a really interesting thing that we get to go through. That's really it's really challenging to be able to communicate those things. But of course, what we do as game designers and as artists and as concept artists is we are about communicating ideas. So it would be pretty poor if we couldn't do that. So it's an interesting challenge, but it's one that's quite good fun. Oh,
I don't know about your definition of fun, but yeah.
Well, I just get asked to sculpt cool things. I don't get involved in the whole thing. Charles has just worked out what on earth is this number that he sent me? He sent me an enormous number. It's so big I can't even say it. It's just lots of twos and lots of zeros, and that's him calculating how many possible dog combinations he could work out, and it's terrifying. I'm going to ignore that number. It scares me.
Yeah, sets is a good idea.
Yeah. That's the long and short of it. Yeah, good idea.
Someone has asked, what's the difference between resin and PVC? So in terms of being a painter and a modeler, in terms of how you treat them, they'll be very similar. Obviously, with resin, usually there's a little bit more labor on the part of the person who's bought the model, because it's be very rare for resin miniatures to come in a single piece due to the nature of how they're molded. I very recently, we put a blog up about the work on the Critical Role miniatures, and making sure that although the miniature of Vax is coming as a resin piece, making it as accessible as possible was quite a challenge because of the nature of how resin molding is done. And whereas the PVC models are kind of straight out of the box usable. But in terms of painting them, if you wash them both with warm soapy water, you've cleaned off the mold lines, you've primed them with a good primer and given it time to dry and cure, you can treat them exactly the same in terms of painting.
I think the thing to bear in mind is, and the reason why, so resin models fundamentally are superior, right? And the reason is the amount of shrinking that happens in the mold. A resin model, resin does not shrink while it's curing, whereas lead does, or like the metal that we use does. We work with a brilliant metal caster over in Holland who is an absolute modern day alchemist. He has special types of metals that don't shrink, that shatter if you snip them a little bit too kind of violently. So basically the resin is a resilient, shrink-free material, which means that it's going to hold the mold a lot longer and more replicant of the final shapes. Whereas with PVC, you've got an ever so slight shrinkage that happens as the material kind of cures off. So this does result in a comparatively slightly softer level of detail. But honestly, you can't tell unless you're painting to kind of absolute golden demon levels. You're painting to kind of use it for D&D or a war game. Once you've got spray on it, it's really, really hard to tell unless you know precisely what you're looking for.
And I think that one of the really critical sort of points there is there is no such thing as a perfect material to work in. Everything at some point is a compromise, and if you don't compromise on anything else, you'll compromise on it costing a lot. And we pursued various different possible ways of manufacturing the project, including resin, and the resin dogs would have been about $18 each. So you would not even have got 2 dogs for the price of the whole project.
Yep.
And I think that is a significant thing, because something that Critical Role definitely taught us is that the most important thing that we could offer people was accessibility. And I mean that in terms of how easy it is to open up the box and just put the model straight out, and also the more affordable they are, the more people can access that product. And I think that's a really good thing, because I think what we've designed here, the characters that April's concepted and then that I've gone forward and sculpted, and the stories that we're producing should be shared with as many people as possible. And so making that affordable has been a big drive for us. I mean, there are pros and cons to every material we could work in, but I think we've made the right choice here, and certainly the number of people that have chosen to support the project would indicate we made the right choice.
Yep.
The other thing, of course, was we ran the numbers on our maximum casting output in resin. And in a scenario where we had made we had the same number of backers as we have now, if we used the resin house that we currently use, it would take approximately 6 years to deliver the miniatures.
Oh,
well, this is why resin's more expensive, is because the model has to cure fully in the mold before it can be released. So the speed with which you can kind of make them is much slower.
Even in metal, I think we worked out that it was close to 18 months. I mean, and one of the things that we've found, it's very difficult to have an exact read on this sort of thing, because until the project finishes, we don't get all of the data and backer kit information. But it would appear at first glance that we're seeing a lot of new and first-time backers, just like we did with Critical Role, which is fantastic, because that means that what we're seeing is a lot of people who want to support the project and want the miniatures and have taken the step of supporting a Kickstarter for the first time. And again, I would hope that is reflective of the fact that we've made the right choice in terms of accessibility and brought those people on board and asked them to have faith in what we're doing. And I'm actually very proud of that. I think that it's really great that we're introducing this to new people. Oh, Becca's off. Bye, Becca.
Bye, Beck.
Carmi's off as well. It's one of the great things about not just this, but these sorts of projects, and one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed on working on stuff that's been role playing and D&D related is meeting all of these new people and meeting this community that is it's very welcoming and it's very supportive. Thank you. I can't even keep up with the followers that we're getting at the moment. We're getting so many. I'm not about to start comparing different communities. That wouldn't be fair. But I have to say the D&D community feels like a really special community. Certainly the parts of it we've been exposed to. And I think that, dog people are the best people. And that's just a fact.
It was, I didn't start playing D&D or start getting into it until I was 15 or 16. Like, a lot of it was because, again, where I come from the middle of Australia. There's nothing there. There's no one there. Like, pastimes where I'm from are like, people go boar hunting or fishing, stuff like that. And once I started getting into it through like fantasy RPGs and stuff, and when the internet came about a bit more where I was, like, it just opened this whole new world. And since, like, it got a bit scary there in the 80s when D&D sort of, with the satanic panic and stuff, kind of went under the radar for a while. And then even in just the last 5 years, how much it's exploded, and how, we've got Critical Role and Adventure Zone and High Rollers, and now there's Critical Role comics, and the Adventure Zone comic just came out, and it's just all this stuff, all this media for us to consume now that is this awesome hobby.
You're absolutely right, and I think that saying it opens up new worlds is a really appropriate way to describe it. I think not wishing to introduce segue into politics in the middle of this, but I find it fascinating that as you say, the satanic panic thing. We were told that D&D was a terrible, harmful influence, and it was going to end society as we knew it,
corrupt the youth.
And I look around, and the people that all play D&D seem to largely be a force for good in the world, and the people that were warning us about its evil seem to be working really hard to destroy the planet. So
absolutely. Like, D&D people are, so far, at least in my experience, are just the nicest. Like, obviously, there's bad apples, no matter the hobby or the fandom, but like, coming at it from the art side of it. So I speak to a lot of other artists who do, floating illustrations for the Dungeons and Dragons manuals, or who do Magic the Gathering art. And like, a lot of those people are my friends, and it's like, they all love this thing, and they all get to work on it, and I get to know them, and it's just a really nice little art community.
That's really awesome. And role playing in general has been a huge force for good in my life. Most of my friends I know through gaming and role playing. I met Kate through role playing. And
oh, no way.
Yeah, absolutely. When we first met, she was dressed as a hobbit and I was dressed as a vampire.
Nice.
Isn't there there's a picture from your wedding, Russ, of you and Kate cutting your wedding cake with a massive battle axe?
It's a giant double-handed battle axe.
Oh, that's wicked! I want to do that. That's great.
We had a parade of honor, like an honor guard of people with swords that we walked through as we went up to the church. So Matt, sorry to drag us back to the whole reason for the stream, which is the beautiful paint job that you're putting together.
Yep.
I noticed with the hat there, you're putting quite an extreme bright white highlight, or it looked white from my camera view.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is that deliberately really sharp to contrast the shadow underneath, or will you knock that back with some sort of glaze or wash?
I'm probably going to glaze it back a little bit, but I did want the edge to be quite poppy, to be honest with you. Mainly because I want the underneath to look quite shadowy.
So is that a technique that people can use if they want to create the sense of a deep shadow? You can almost edge it with a lighter colour to create that contrast?
Yes, absolutely. So the very best example I can give you is if you want to make, for example, your metallics look really shiny and silvery, then you need to contrast them with the blackest, darkest, mattest colour that you possibly can. So that's why I always shade my metallics with a non-metallic black, because it makes the metallic bit that's left. April will be able to tell you much more about some of the grandmasters using those techniques to basically do non-metallic metallics back in those amazing oil paintings you see in places like the Louvre and stuff like that.
Oh, for sure. Like anything from the Baroque period.
Mm.
So the Baroque period is very famous for its very, very dark darks and very brilliant lights. Because for those painters back then, light was like the light from heaven. It was the light from God. So Caravaggio is probably the best artist to look at if
Yeah.
anyone's interested in that stuff.
Yep. Definitely.
Chiaroscuro. They use a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But we are going to kind of just knock him back slightly. I have been. This is bit more of a noodle. I've been noodling and just enjoying listening to you guys chatting rather than concentrating on making this as new painter friendly as possible. So hopefully this is a bit more of a social stream rather than a necessarily out and out instructional stream. But
I think that hopefully people get the benefit of it regardless. I mean, I'm certainly finding it interesting. April, would you? So just linking that up, obviously we're talking about like the classic masters way of painting things like metals. There's been a real surge of interest in the miniatures painting world for painting non-metallic metals and physically creating light and shade by hand rather than using metallic paints. I suppose, I mean, I've not looked into it in huge detail. I suppose that people that want to try those techniques could do a lot worse than go back to those classic paintings and do the same sort of studies that you're talking about, but carry that onto a miniature and do it in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, that would probably be a really interesting way to go about it. Like I've never really painted minis before, but I know that my art skills in 2D are probably quite transferable just with my knowledge of color and light.
I've got a bunch of pictures on my phone that I took when I worked in Paris for quite a bit of time and got to spend an awful lot of time in the Louvre and places like that. And some of those paintings are just phenomenal. And I was that kind of weird guy taking very, very specific pictures of very, very small parts of each painting.
Oh, you can always tell who's an artist at art galleries because they're either sitting there like staring at one thing or taking really specific photos.
Yeah,
later. That's me going up to Greek statues and like I'll just be photographing like someone's lats or
or like a little divot where the light is catching just right, and you're like, I have to capture this.
Absolutely. Matt, is the Musée d'Orsay still going in Paris? Do you know the art gallery that was built inside the train station?
I actually know the answer to that one. It is. My art director just got back from there.
Oh, really? Oh, that had such an impression on me when I was an 18-year-old art student going to Paris for the first time. That place just blew my mind.
You Europeans, so close to everything.
You European with your culture and stuff.
You're so spoiled.
Well, according to 52% of our population, we're way too close to it. And need to extricate ourselves at the earliest opportunity.
Very topical political joke.
Yeah.
And then also, I see the UK is like literally on fire. So you guys are going great. 10 out of 10.
Oh yeah, yes, I love it when nature decides to also make political commentary.
It's almost as if the climate is changing. Almost.
Yeah.
I made a very small, but it felt significant for me, stand yesterday when I went to have my hair cut at my local barber's. And after 5 minutes of listening to climate change denial from him and the person who was cutting his hair, I announced that I had changed my mind and would take my business elsewhere.
Oh, good on you. Small victories, man.
Small victories, yeah.
That would have been really impressive if you did it halfway through your haircut as well.
But no, that would be a commitment.
Yeah.
Taking my hair and I'm going home.
Yeah.
Well, anyone who's seen me looks like I've left the barber's halfway through a haircut anyway.
Oh man, it was so hot where I lived. I just ended up shaving my head. So now I have no hair.
I remember seeing a picture of you, and it's weird because of the conversation we were having about recent movies that we liked. Because I saw you posted a selfie of you with no hair and a big pair of reflective sunglasses, and I showed it to Kate, and she was like, "She looks like Tank Girl."
Oh man, I love Tank Girl. My cousin was like, "You should have left like little plaits."
Yeah.
So I could do the full Tank Girl because like I grew up with Tank Girl, and now we've got Furiosa with the cool shaved head, and
yes,
there's just so many, and like so many of the women in Black Panther shave their heads. So
Oh my god, they are so amazing.
oh,
Apparently, I saw a thing where getting Millie Bobby Brown to shave her head as 11. Initially, she was very reluctant to do it until she saw Fury Road.
oh
And
nice.
realised
And
how
she saw
utterly
Furiosa,
badass. Yeah, she saw how good Charlize Theron looked, and then she was cool with it.
Oh,
It's great. And like for Halloween, I can just go as 11, really tall 11.
Well, why not? All you need
Yeah.
is the dress and a box of Eggos. I mean, as a cosplay outfit, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
And a nosebleed.
I always had a massive crush on Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. She just looks amazing. Yeah, with that short hair.
I'll tell you who does look phenomenal is, I don't know if you've seen any of the set photos for the new James Cameron Terminator movie, but Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor looks unbelievable.
She's like super buff. Yeah,
She's super buff, yeah, with loads of ash blonde hair. She just looks amazing.
She's always been buff though, hasn't she? She's like absolutely ripped all her life.
Yeah, after getting into shape at C2, I think she's stuck with it. But yeah, she looks like, I wouldn't mess with her. She looks like she could take the Terminator apart with her bare hands. I'm so excited for a film with an older female protagonist, because it's something we just don't get to see.
No, I really don't. And stuff like that, I try my best to portray in fantasy art, because there's a lot of wizened old like male characters, like traditional wizards, or there's gruff barbarians who are a bit older and covered in scars. But like, where's my 50-year-old female barbarian?
Well, hold that thought, because there's a big project idea that we'd like to do in the future.
There is.
That's spilling too many beans.
I'm just interested in variations, like the gnolls I did a while ago. Like I've been doing more of those guys based on different types of hyenas, because there's so many, and the regular gnolls.
Gotta
always
have
based
regular
off
gnolls.
spotted. Yeah, they're always based off spotted hyenas, but there's just so many different ones.
I'm just going to come back to this just for the sake of continuity while I wait for my basing to dry. So now I'm just going to paint again, building that red up. So this is the third coat.
Could you? Because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about how I would approach finishing this, and I'm interested if this technique would work. I look at that and I would put a red ink wash, a red glaze over it to strengthen the colour, but use the translucency of the red ink. And now you're kind of doing the same thing with paint here, aren't you? Do you think an ink would work?
I think an ink would work, but it would give it a really shiny kind of property. So depends on what you want to feel. So because I'm painting cloth, I don't really want it to have much kind of specular on it. I want it to be quite, quite a sort of diffuse sort of feeling material. So I sticking to paint. But again, I'm just I've literally used the same color paint, and you can see how the richness is starting to really build up in those light areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just let that dry off. I'm just waiting for the base to dry on Cornelius. So just messing about. Red is my favorite color to paint.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite? What's the word? Like substance to paint? Like is fabric your favorite thing to paint, or is skin?
Skin. Yeah.
Skin?
Yeah. It's faces. 100% faces. Like Russ and I have talked about this before. I actually leave the face till last, because it's a bit like when you're eating a meal. If you eat the bit that you really, really like first, then the rest of the meal is a bit disappointing. So I tend to kind of save my favourite bit until the end, and then I get to treat myself with the face. But there's also a logical painting reason for that as well, because I want the face to be the brightest part of any model. I can see what my contrast levels are, and I can adjust how brightly I paint the face right at the very end to make sure it really, really stands out.
Interesting.
But
by contrast, I like to paint the face first for the entirely ridiculous reason that I like to know who I'm painting, and so I'd like to go in and do the face first and find the character of that model, and then I will fill in everything else, which is a much less pragmatic and much more kind of philosophical approach, but it worked for me. But then that's how I approach sculpting after I've blocked out posing. Usually the very first thing I will do is establish what I want the face to be before I work on the rest of the model, because I like to know who I'm working on.
Makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of narrative in faces, or there should be. One of the things I think digital sculpting has really helped, that miniatures have really benefited from, is if you go back maybe 10 years, miniatures will broadly all have the same face if they're from a particular sculptor. They'll have one very similar way of doing faces because they're working at scale with tiny sculpting tools. And one of the things that digital sculpting has enabled us to do is really unlock a huge variety of characters and forms that were just too challenging for most sculptors to achieve.
Which we then cut and paste on most of our minis.
Well, it depends. I noticed the other day that my brother did a load of freelance World War II miniatures, and every single one of them's got exactly the same head. He's like, "It's a dude in a helmet, man. What do you want from me?"
Yeah. They're wearing a big old helmet. You know, what can you do?
Right. Let's let him.
Bianca said in our previous topic of really badass older protagonists, is Robin Wright in Wonder Woman is a really good example of someone who is flying that flag. I love the idea.
Movie.
Oh, it's so good. I love that, Robin Wright's career started playing Buttercup in Princess Bride. So she starts out as the most quintessential princess you could have, and then we fast forward to now, and she's playing the most badass princess you could possibly have. I kind of like that.
Right, so before we have a last look, so this is basically what I'm talking about in terms of using the light and the dark on the base color to kind of give you that gradient that goes through, and I've painted that with the exact same color red all the way through.
That's amazing. I genuinely, like, speaking as someone who knows how paint works and knows what I would have to do by hand to make that happen, I'm really impressed.
Yeah,
I'm probably more impressed than people who are just watching you do it for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, it's dead easy, right? And now if I really want to build in these shadows, all I can do is grab a darker red, for example. So we'll just go for like a deep red, squirt a bit of that on my palette. The nozzle is blocked, so we won't explode that. So I'm just going to grab that, and then this is a really simple technique. So when you're first learning to paint, you probably just want to layer. Okay, so what we're going to do with layering is we're going to take a bit of the paint, and we're going to literally look to paint it into the shadows. Right. So always pull into where you want the shadow to be. So I want the shadow to be here, and I'm just going to let that dry. I'm not going to try and mess about with that. And I can see where my shadows are because it's the darker parts of the model, right? So I'm not even trying to blend it here. All I'm trying to do is pull the paint into the shadows, because where your brush leaves the model is where the paint is the thickest. So I'm just pushing the paint into where the shadows are. And this
is a sort of next level effect, isn't it? To take what you've already got there and just pop it even further.
Yeah. So then if you want to get all fancy dancy on it, then what you can do is you can basically put the paint in. All right. So I'm just basically putting the paint in, and then I'm going to wet my brush. And then I'm basically just going to feather along the edge of where the paint is. And that just basically smooths it out. I'm going to do that again. All right, and then now you've got a feathering blend on a dark bit going into a light bit. That makes any sense at all?
That's pretty nifty, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit tricky to see because obviously while the paint's reflective, you can't see the blend. But I can tell that once it dries, it's going to work really nicely.
Yeah. So all I'm doing is just softening the edge of where it comes in, and you can see where I've accentuated the shadow now. And then you do the opposite in the other direction. And then if you want to get really flash about it, then what you can do is you can paint basically a bright colour. So your base red. And then while that's wet, what I can do is I can get a very dark colour. So let's take an almost black red. Right? And then I can basically run that along the side. Yeah, while the model's wet. You can see like the sharp line. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And now all I'm going to do with a damp brush is I'm just going to basically soften that. Just soften that up. And now you've got a very, very sharp delineation between light and dark. You can see where it's really light and where it's really dark, but it's still a smooth blend.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
This is a slightly more advanced technique, though, isn't it? Because you're messing around with wet paint on the model, and there's a danger of flooding detail if you're not careful.
Yeah. That's something that you kind of need to build up to. But no, with the feathering, with the layering, going back to like the black paint, work out where the dark shadow is. So I want a dark shadow here. Basically, paint your shadow in. Don't worry about trying to do any transitions. Just learn how to paint with light. Basically, it's like where am I putting my volumes in? So these are my dark volumes. And you can go back in, you can grab your lighter paint, and then you basically paint the lighter areas over the top. And then again, going back to this drawing, if you're painting your light color over the top of the dark color, it's going to retain the darkness from or the contrast levels from underneath. That makes any sense.
These are the same sorts of techniques you see in contouring and stage makeup and all of those sorts of things, isn't it? It's just creating deeper shadows than actually exist on the surface.
Yeah. If you can contour your face, if you're into wearing makeup and you understand how to contour your face and make your nose look thinner and your cheeks look thinner, then it's exactly the same thing with painting minis. That's all we're doing is contouring the model.
It's exactly the same as painting in 2D too.
Yeah, I suppose so. Actually, yeah. It's a kind of a 2.5D thing. You've got a 3D surface that you then use a 2D technique on, I suppose.
All right, I'm going to lose myself in painting red. I just love the richness that red kind of starts developing.
You love red so much.
I do love red. Right, let's have a look at Cornelius, because I think he is largely done. Yeah, it's when you start messing about and putting green in the shadows or purple in the shadows, but... Right, so Cornelius, yeah, he's all right, and he's come out not bad at all. So I think the last thing I'm going to do just to kind of finish him off is I'm going to go in with that yellow glaze. I am going to use an ink, so I'm going to use a scale 75 Inktense yellow, and I'm going to do a very very thin glaze over the top just to give it the subtlest of tints of yellow.
Magma 2050 says, will we be doing more of these streams? They would be interested in seeing how to handle shading of the multicolored dogs like Ceres or the Rowan pattern on Montague. Absolutely, we will be. As we move forwards, there will be more stream content along these lines. And again, with this video, as we did before, we will publish a brief overview of the paints used so that if you want to refer back to this and recreate the colours yourself, you'll be able to do so.
So the only fly in the ointment with what with it being summer is I'm on my family vacation for a couple of weeks. So it won't be until the end of August before I'm back at my desk for painting fun times. But certainly once I'm back at my desk from family holidays, I've got actually a couple of months at home. So I want to get a whole bunch of Doggies painting tutorials done and a whole bunch of Critical Role tutorials done. So I'm looking forward to kind of really getting into the thick of my painting.
I think that would be really good. I think we can look at someone like Monty next as a multicolored dog. You say we'll get these streams on video on demand. Yes, if you come to the Twitch channel, it'll be available. It'll be on Matt's YouTube channel, and we'll post a direct link to it in tomorrow's pup date so that it could be watched there. I think they stay on Twitch at the moment for about 8 weeks before they get archived.
Yeah.
But we're getting to the point where we're going to be able to extend that. It's all to do with viewer numbers and how Twitch allocates your account. So that's something we'll look into, but we will be archiving them on YouTube for a more permanent solution. It's one of those many, many, many things that we need to do once we're out of the other side of Gen Con.
Oh, look at them.
Oh, bless.
That's awesome. I'm quite pleased with them. They were such a lot of fun to paint. They are super cute and super fun to paint. I can't think of better minis to kind of get learning to paint on. I really can't. First, so easy. If you base color and ink wash, and then a really light dry brush, and it's amazing what it can look like. So, yep, happy days.
The great thing is we're not
Yeah.
painting humans as well, so you're not having to mess around with skin tones and things.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I'm kind of done with him. I'm going to take a photo, stick him on Twitter. If we'll stick some links to various Twitter accounts. I know Russ is far more prolific than I am. He and April are regularly on Twitter, so it's definitely worth giving those guys a follow. I tend to post more sporadically, but they tend to be pictures of things that I've painted. So if you want to see what's coming off my painting table, then follow me. We'll stick links up on the appropriate somewhere or other. Or Russ can chuck them in the chat or something now. But that's the very best place to keep up to date with what's going on with us, really. I'm kind of done.
I'm more than happy to call that a night. The last few things coming up. Do we have an Instagram? No, we don't. It's seeing as we literally paint miniatures as our core business, or sculpt miniatures as our core business. It's an enormous oversight. Again, I'm going to refer you to Gen Con and see what happens afterwards. Thanks so much to everyone who has stopped by, asked questions, lurked in the chat, or just watched the stream, or you're watching this in the future via video on demand. Hello from the past. Thank you very much for giving us your time. And April, did you want to say anything before we sign off?
I just looked at the Kickstarter, and in my piddly Canadian dollars, we're past 500,000, so that's super exciting.
Wow, that's pretty impressive by anyone's count.
That's a lot of dogs.
That is a lot of dogs for a lot of people. Thank you to everyone who has followed the campaign and shown this much faith in our first projects. We very, very much appreciate every single one of you.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much. I'm going to hit the old transition button, and we're going to sign off. So see you later. Until next time. I'll be much more tanned next time.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.